Welcome, Vanakkam, Swagatham. In this video, with your kind permission, I wish to take a literary turn. After all my life, I made a living out of literature, reading it, trying to make sense of it. How well I taught, I don't know. Only the victims know the truth. But the taste for literature and the literary formation of my mind gained through this lifelong love affair with literature still persists with me, and therefore, in the immediate context, I cannot refrain from giving a little free play to my literary imagination. The immediate context is that of Donald Trump, who really exists at the nerve center of human consciousness globally at the present time. The question that came to my mind late last night, which I thought over for a long time during the small hours of the night, is this. If America had a writer like Mark Twain, the great humorist, second only to Charles Dickens of England, who wrote novels like The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, etc., etc. Looking at Donald Trump's flamboyance, his track record so far, his unique characteristics as a human being, and his great image as a global leader, etc. Mark Twain, with his great sense of humor, would have written a novel titled The Adventures of Donald Trump. Now, let's imagine that Mark Twain has written a novel with our dear friend Donald Trump. When I say dear friend, I mean Modi's dear friend. So, therefore, dear friend to all of us. And let's imagine that Mark Twain has written and published a novel under the title The Adventures of Donald Trump, and that book falls into my hands, and I look at it as a literary critic, or at least as one who is called upon to teach that text to undergraduates or graduate students. What is it that I would derive from a study of the character of Donald Trump? That's the subject of these two videos. I will not be able to include all that I want to say in one video because of the limitations of human patience, and therefore I'm going to break it into two videos, and both will be uploaded in quick succession. So the novel that we are trying to understand is The Adventures of Donald Trump, and let's get started. As a kind of preface to this exercise, let's remind ourselves of the fact that a great discomfort is growing in the United States about the desirability of allowing Donald Trump to continue as the President of the United States. Whether or not he has the mental stability and the maturity of judgment, the rationality of judgment to hold that great office, that decisive office, and carry out his responsibilities. Is he in a fit frame of mind to undertake and carry out this great responsibility? That question is gathering momentum in the United States. So that also is at the back of my mind as I invite you to join me in undertaking this quasi-literary exercise of unpacking the character and meaning of this literary figure, Donald Trump, who exists in Mark Twain's putative novel, The Adventures of Donald Trump. The very first thing I would notice in Donald Trump as a character is that he is a man of many fixations. He's obsessed with many things. He's fixated. And I know from experience and also from my limited reading in psychology that fixations pertain to inferiority complex. A person whose mind is developed in a wholesome or healthy manner will be free from fixations. But a person who is smarting under inferiority complex will have and will harbor many, many fixations. For example, one of Trump's very compulsive fixations is the need to discredit others. Trump can't open his mouth without saying something unsavory, uncharitable about Joe Biden. And he invokes Biden and others like him in order to show to others, in order to convince others how incomparably superior he is to all of them. So that's called superiority complex. And psychologists tell us that there is nothing called superiority complex. The reality is inferiority complex. And superiority complex is a posture a person assumes in public in order to compensate for the inferiority complex which is really needling him. Because of the paucity of time, I do not propose to give further explanations for this. Now, I used to have a colleague in St. Stephen's College, a lady, who was of a similar makeup. She could not finish a day unless she brought some kind of embarrassment, pain, hurt, humiliation to somebody in our own midst. One day I had to ask her point blank as we sat face to face. I said, Miss So-and-so, you can't sleep unless you have made somebody miserable. And believe you me, she agreed with me. That's a kind of fixation. It's a very regrettable psychological sickness, pathology of the mind. And it's very obvious to me that our good friend, Modi's good friend, Trump suffers from that. Now, one proof that there is solid ground to Trump's sense of inferiority complex is his proven ineffectualness. Trump is one of the most ineffectual person or world leaders you can think of. You think of anything that he has started and taken to its completion. Take the most recent example of constituting the Board of Peace to establish peace in Gaza and to spearhead the reconstruction of Gaza. What has happened to the Board of Peace? Does anyone talk about it? Has this Board of Peace even scratched a line on a sheet of paper? No, but it was ushered in with great fanfare. And this is typical of a person who wants to massage his public image by saying this, that, and the other, by undertaking grand gestures, unfolding grand visions, but does not have the wherewithal, the character, and the stuff within him to act on it and to deliver on it. It is this that actually perpetuates and intensifies the inferiority complex. Take into consideration anything else that he has come up with. For example, he wanted to make Canada the 51st state of the United States of America. Succeeded. He wanted to annex Greenland. He wanted to take over the Panama Canal. And now he wants to take over Iran so that there will be great prosperity in America and also, incidentally, for the people of Iran. Like all things that have gone on or happened before, the Iran episode also will be a bus ride to nowhere, because that's the only thing you can expect from a person who is smarting under very serious inferiority complex like Trump, who has a psychological need. He doesn't understand it as such. If you say this to him, he'll be very shocked, surprised, and indignant. There's a psychological need to project himself as the linchpin of the world, who can cause anything to come into being just by the swish of his little finger. The fact of the matter is that he cannot deliver on anything at all. So, in spite of the fact that he has repeatedly failed, his eyes still do not open on this reality. He does not learn from his experiences. Therefore, he goes on repeating the same mistake for the main reason that for a person who is suffering from various fixations on account of his inferiority complex, his sense of reality will be very poor. You ask any psychologist. A person harboring many fixations, a person who is smarting under an inferiority complex, will not be able to relate in full awareness to the world around, and therefore his sense of reality will be very seriously diluted, if not jeopardized. Such a person will go on committing the same mistake and he'll never learn from any of them. He will go on glorifying himself, and that's the main reason, in fact, that's the only reason why he comes up with these grand ideas. And this need for self-glorification takes him from one grand project to another without recognizing the need to deliver on any one of them, because he has got a little time at the center of world consciousness through a project that he projects. Then his usefulness is over, then he moves on to the next. I sometimes wonder what Trump would have done without Biden. He could not have made his speeches without Biden. In fact, the sole motive force, the wellspring of Trump's rhetorical powers is Joe Biden. And that's the reason why he cannot complete a speech without spewing venom and vomiting gall on poor Joe Biden. I'm not saying that Joe Biden is a great leader. What I'm saying is that Trump's need to run him down, to damn and discredit him at every word, bespeaks a certain degree of psychological illness, the pathology of mind. So that is as far as fixations are concerned, compulsive obsessions. You can, of course, identify many more. I've given only some typical illustrative instances. It will be very interesting to study Donald Trump in light of his fixations. That's point number one. Point number two, which I have already touched upon, which is the fact that he is completely out of touch with reality, which results from his fixations. For example, take the Iran war, US-Israel war against Iran. When Iran is doing pretty well, and when Trump finds that Iran is a big handful, Trump says, you better surrender. We'll stop everything. You offer an unconditional surrender to us. Why would Iran surrender when it is doing so well? But Trump does not have the sense of reality to think that way. He's very simplistic. And he's as simplistic as he is out of touch with reality. His solution is simple. Let Iran surrender itself unconditionally to him, and then there'll be peace. The fact that Iran is keenly motivated and more encouraged to continue the good fight doesn't occur to him, in spite of the fact that the painful consequences of it are pinching him day in and day out. This will not register. You can't possibly think of a person who is so completely out of joint with reality as our friend, Modi's friend, Trump is. So, if you read the Iranian responses to Trump, the state media, etc., people's reactions, spokespersons of Iran, etc., you will find a very strong element of ridicule. They can't think of Trump without an eruption of ridicule upon him. So, Trump also cannot, for example, understand why the Canadians do not immediately agree. The moment he suggested that Canada should be the 51st state of the United States, why don't the Canadians immediately grab that idea? It doesn't occur to Trump that people can have some self-respect, a sense of national pride. Therefore, they will not jump at such ideas. It doesn't occur to him. In fact, he's indignant that his brilliant idea was checkmated or resisted, and he holds a deep-seated grudge against Mark Carney for not cooperating with him in this regard. So that is a sense of realism. Now I come to the third. With that, I'll close the present video. The rest I'll include in the second video. The third point I want to make is related to the first I've already made, and that is, because of its inferiority complex, because of its alienation from reality and the capacity to think rationally, Trump has a psychological need to be in conflict. Now, there are two ways in which you can realize or experience or showcase to others your importance. One is the constructive way. Do something meaningful, something profound. The other is be destructive, cause pain, cause embarrassment, unleash anarchy. Then certainly people will think of you all the time. So Trump has a psychological need to be in conflict. And not many people seem to realize, even Trump watchers, do not seem to realize that his need to be in perpetual conflict, and he improvise one context after another for conflict. Therefore, his compulsive need to be in a state of chronic conflict arises out of the fact, and this is extremely important to realize, arises out of the fact, the notable fact, that he is one who is at war with himself. He is not only in conflict with others, he is in conflict with himself. So conflicts, therefore, are of two kinds. One, inevitable conflicts. For example, somebody attacks your country, you are the president or prime minister, as the case might be, then you have to take defensive action in order to protect your country. That is inevitable, necessary, unavoidable conflict. There is something healthy about it, and it can generate heroism. The second is impulsive and eminently avoidable conflict. The reason for this conflict does not rest with serious factors or considerations outside of oneself. The reason for this conflict rests entirely within oneself. But the curious thing is that the person who initiates these conflicts does not realize that it is a psychology and not realpolitik that plays the decisive role in this. As far as his conscious mind is concerned, it is realpolitik. But his unconscious mind tells another story. There is a deep need to be in conflict because he knows only one way to express his personality, which is in the language of conflict, of opposition, of humiliating others, of asserting himself, inflicting his will on others. The classic example, of course, is the way he insulted and humiliated President Zelensky in the White House. So the second type of conflict, that is impulsive conflicts driven by inner psychology, by psychic forces that the person himself does not understand, that is abnormal. It's harmful. And it can mean enormous harm to the people as a whole, to the country as a whole, especially if a person of that psychic state happens to be the main leader, the main governor, ruler of the country, as it happens in the present case. So this kind of conflictual orientation, as it is put in psychology, the conflictual orientation belongs to the power syndrome. If your personality is driven by power, which excludes love altogether, then you have to really inflict yourself on others, and that can be done only by creating serial conflicts or conflictual situations one after the other. Power becomes real only in conflict. Now think of yourself as the President of the United States of America. And you have a 4-year term, 4-year tenure. And during the 4 years of your tenure, not a single conflict takes place. Your country lives in total peace. Then you have no way to realize your power. You're a power-crazy person. There are constructive and creative ways, life-friendly ways, life-enriching ways of exercising, realizing one's effectiveness, one's power, one's relevance, etc. But if you don't have that and your personality is configured in some other fashion, the only way you can really realize your importance is by improvising continual chronic conflicts and then putting oneself into the thick of those conflicts and ensuring that the attention of the globe is riveted on him, as in fact it was in the last 40 days. The attention of the entire world was focused on Donald Trump. I'm sure he hugely enjoyed it. So this is the psychology. So such a mindset, a person with such a mindset will also claim for himself the right to act arbitrarily and irrationally. Don't expect any reason. If you ask Trump, what were your rational considerations in deciding that Canada should be a part of America, or Greenland should be annexed right away, or Panama Canal should be seized? He would say, forget about it. Who are you to ask of me a reason? The President of America is obliged to give no reason. For the simple reason that he would not have any reason whatsoever. Reason that is legitimate. One can always enunciate subjective reasons which may seem sensible to oneself, but it may not make sense to anybody else. So Trump's psychological need to erupt, to burst out into impotent animosity, hatred. Once again, Zelensky, just remember that. That display of bad temper was utterly, totally gratuitous, without any purpose, without any hope of gaining any advantage either for himself or for his country. Rather, everything suggested the contrary. Trump became globally suspect. America's image took a beating. But all that doesn't matter. As far as Trump is concerned, it is a psychological trip of having afford himself the great banquet of erupting in full public view, the global eye, and trampling somebody under his foot, particularly the president of another country. What greater recipe than this in order to realize and showcase one's unlimited power? This is how a shallow, infantile mind would think. It shows a very regrettable, lamentable degree of mental and human underdevelopment. It is such a character who happens to be the incumbent of the foremost and the most powerful office on planet Earth. Well, I have not completed my character study of Mark Twain's protagonist in the novel, The Adventures of Donald Trump. We'll continue this exercise in the next video. So I want to thank you for staying with me so far. I also want to extend an invitation to you to continue into the second part of the same video. I can assure you that understanding Trump in this light would afford very interesting insights into human psychology. Thank you. See you soon.